Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fableheim and my MISTOVER class deep dive series. Today, we're going over the Onmyouji, the class that I have the least experience with. But if you're not interested in seeing every single one of his abilities and potentially theory crafting their uses, here is your TLDR. The Onmyouji is more or less the opposite of the Grim Reaper. Whereas the Reaper lives to debuff all living creatures, the Onmyouji's purpose is to buff and cleanse their friends. Unlike the sister, however, the Onmyouji does have dedicated offensive abilities, so you can use him to deal damage, unlike the masochist. So with that out of the way, let's get into every single ability. First up, as always, is Amulet Shot. Here's damage dealt for no mana cost. Inflict damage equal to 100% of your attack on one enemy, pretty typical. Can be used from the middle or back column on any enemy in the front or middle column. Very standard. The Onmyouji's first ability is Elemental Collapse. Inflict damage equal to 150% of your attack on one enemy, and a 25% evade decrease debuff, 80% chance you move backward one tile. This can be used in the front or middle column on any enemy in any square. Now, because I haven't had much use for this, I can't go too much into how powerful this is, but 150% of your attack is pretty respectable. I believe that's how much the Grim Reaper deals, which has always made me happy. So if you don't mind a group that does a lot of movement, this could be an ability for you. Personally, I don't think the Onmyouji should be used this way, but I'm sure someone somewhere is going to prove me wrong. The next of their abilities is the Misfortune Detector. Remove a weakened status debuff from one party member. Give one party member a 25% crit increase debuff. Not debuff, a buff. This can be used from the middle or back column on any friendly square. This could be very useful in certain circumstances. It depends on how many weakens the enemy throws out. I personally haven't encountered too many, but again, we're only in the first two zones, so I'm sure there's going to be someone somewhere. And the 25% crit increase buff could be devastating, especially if you combine it with a Shadowblade who gives herself her own crit buff. So high potential here, just one of the niche uses. The next ability is Purification. Removes a bleeding Mesmerize from one party member. Give one party member a 50% HP recovery booster. This can be used from the middle or back column on friends in any square. Now this is redundant if you're running a sister with her own bleed removal. I don't think the 50% HP recovery booster here is that significant, although you could use it on the Paladin. Say you aren't running a sister, and you are running a Paladin, you could double the effectiveness of a Paladin's healing when they use their own HP recovery booster. Again, I think this is kind of a niche option. You could also, if you cut the sister, which I think is a potential option, then you'd probably want to run this. And it doesn't have the stipulation that you can't use it on yourself, so that's important to remember. The next ability is Eyes Wide Open. This removes immobilization, stun, and sleep mesmerizes from one party member. Give one party member a 25% hit increase buff. This can be used in the middle or back column, and can be used on any friendly square. This, I believe, will almost be mandatory. If you're bringing the Onmyouji, this is probably a good spell to have. Now again, in the first few zones we don't encounter any of these mesmerizes, but I'm sure eventually we will, and when we do, this will be more than valuable. The 15% hit increase buff is literally just icing on the cake. The removal is already the cake. The hit buff, just something beautiful. The next ability is Muscle Amulet. Give party members in one column a 25% attack increase buff. Give party members in one column a 25% defense increase buff. This can be used in the middle or back column for any friendly column. I think that if you're looking for an Onmyouji to provide flat utility to the group, this is going to be it. 25% attack and 25% defense is amazing. It's not very often that you are handed a sword and a shield. Usually it's either your offense or your defense that is being improved, and not both. And it's important to keep in mind that this lasts for 3 turns. So if you're only using 2 columns, like my initial formation usually is, then you could literally buff everyone, if you felt like it. I think this is a good ability. But on its same note, the next one is Mental Amulet. Give party members in one column a 25% hit increase buff. Give party members in one column a 25% speed increase buff. This can be used from the middle or back column on any friendly column. This is the exact same as Muscle Amulet, but it's going after something different. I think that this will be nichely powerful. I wouldn't be surprised if there were certain enemies that like reduced your hit to ungodly levels or that were way faster than you, and this could bring you up to par to challenge them without feeling like you're getting run over. Or you could just use it to run over someone else. I think it's a good option. Another powerful ability provided by the Onmyouji, if you want to run a more support role and not more of an offensive role. The next ability, speaking of offensive roles, is Paper Crow. Inflict damage equal to 40% of your attack on enemies in one column, and continuous damage equal to 40% of your attack with an 80% chance. This can be used in the front or middle column on enemies in the middle or back columns. This is a good ability, and this ability alone gave me a thought. I mentioned it in the Witch video, but I think there is a strong case for a composition that focuses on bleeds. The Shadow Blade, the Witch, and the Onmyouji all have bleed abilities that affect one column, and the Sister has a cooperative ability that can be used to inflict bleed on everyone. So I think that's a real option, and when I begin recording for the combat part of this, I think that's one of the compositions I'm going to run. The next ability is unique to the Onmyouji. It is called Paper Turtle. It summons a level 1 Spirit Turtle at the designated location. This can be used in the middle or back columns, and can be placed in any friendly square that's not already occupied. I'm pretty sure. Again, I'm actually not sure what these spirits are. They could be decoys that take attacks towards himself, and if they are, I think this is going to be sort of a preference. It could be very useful if you're fighting an enemy that deals monstrous amounts of damage, so that it can take that hit for you if you can see the hit coming. But other than that, If it's more like a pet that does stuff, that can attack and heal and whatnot, then this could be very useful. Having one extra body, even if it's a fake body, can be very powerful in games like this. The next ability is called the Paper Koi. Inflict damage equal to 40% of your attack on all enemies in one row, with an 80% chance of causing stun. This can be used in the front or middle column, and on any enemy row. An ability like this is powerful. The Witch actually has an ability like this as well, and it will come down to who you want your stunner to be, but it's between the Onmyouji and the Witch for AoE stuns, at least in a row. And I think this plays more into the Onmyouji's role than it does the Witch's. You could always use the Witch's stun if you felt like the Onmyouji had more things to do that turn, like buff or whatever. Personally, I think this is an ability I'm going to keep on the Onmyouji, and I'll let him run kind of the utility role with whatever needs to be done. If there needs to be bleeds or buffs or stuns, he's got it covered. Now the first of the Onmyouji's cooperative abilities, unfortunately I have none of these unlocked, but the first one is give all party members a 25% bleeding buff, requires a Ronin in front of you. This can be used from any column and will affect all allies. I believe that this cooperative ability is going to be very situational indeed. I'm sure that there will be some enemies that do nothing but inflict bleed, and as I mentioned before, bleeding can stack. So if you have multiple enemies inflicting multiple bleeds, it will be devastating. Having 25% increase bleed, when it says bleeding buff, it means bleeding resistance. And if you can increase your bleed resistance against enemies who do nothing but bleed, that's obviously very good. So in the right circumstance, this will save your life. Good ability. The next cooperative ability is called Right Way to Love. Increase all party members' HP by 120% of your attack. Requires a sister behind you. This can be used from any column and affects all allies. This is very similar to Overwhelming Love from the sister. It's just a huge AoE heal. Well, it's slightly more powerful than the sisters. This can be a powerful emergency heal if you're fighting enemies that attack all of your expedition members at once. So it can save your life. Their final cooperative ability is called Recitation. Inflict an instant kill attack on all enemies with a 25% chance of success, requires a Grim Reaper next to you, and is ineffective on bosses. This can be used in any column and will affect all enemy squares. Just like with the ability for the Grim Reaper, I think this is more for flavor than anything else, although I do think this is more useful because if you're fighting a lot of enemies or a lot of weak enemies, you can try this out and just flip a coin on a few things to see if it clears some things out. It might even be useful on boss attempts. If a boss spawns a lot of ads, then you can try and use this to control the ads without having to stop DPSing the boss. I think this will be a very situational cooperative ability, but its option is cool. As far as the Onmyouji's expedition ability is called Detect Trap. It costs 16 food, just like the Paladin's Crush Obstacles, and you can mark and disarm traps around you for 15 turns. I actually have never used this, but this is what you use to clear poison and any other traps that will appear in the later levels. Pretty useful. For the most part, I just kind of eat the poison, but I'm sure that is very bad later on. As far as jinxes are concerned for the Onmyouji, I don't have a whole lot of practice, so I don't know what to tell you. Although I did notice they have a white jinx, which... does this mean this is just for the Onmyouji? You'll recall the witch also had a jinx like this. But anyway, energy conservation reads, every time you use a skill, your speed decreases by 10%, lasts for 1 turn. I don't like this, but I don't think I can do anything about that. And there are apparently jinxes that involve the spirits, which again are an Onmyouji only thing, so look out for those, make sure nothing terrible happens, and of course always keep in mind jinxes that affect your positioning, because those can be very bad. Especially if you're rocking elements of collapse, where you plan on doing a lot of moving. You can always move yourself into a less advantageous position if you have a lot of jinxes that deal with someone being behind you or adjacent to you or whatever. Just things to keep in mind. And welcome to the combat portion of this video. Before we get into too much, I would like to address my formation as always. Now this was from the recording that I did testing out the bleed build, which involves the Onmyouji, the Witch, the Shadow Blade, you only need 1, but I brought 2, and the Sister. If you watched the video on the Witch, you'll know that this testing was rather successful. Although the Onmyouji was only level 1, so his DPS contribution was not very high, and I had a hard time grasping just how much DPS the Onmyouji could do, but overall I think he's on par with the Grim Reaper. And if you watched the Grim Reaper video, you know that that's more than enough for me, because I love the Grim Reaper. So for the formation, the Onmyouji is sitting in the middle row next to the Sister. His adjacent character is irrelevant, at least for this particular build, but he does need to be in the center row, and the reason for that is because we are using Paper Crow as the bleed ability, and when we didn't have people to apply the bleed to, or we didn't want to, then we used the Paper Koi ability, which can be used from either the first or second column, just like the bleed ability, but we also brought the Paper Turtle, because it was my first time really testing that, and he had eyes wide open, but all of his buff cleansing type things need to be used from either the middle or third column, just like the Paper Turtle. So his positioning is incredibly important, and if he was moved either forward or backwards, it could really mess with the Onmyouji, which is why I think it's probably best to keep him away from the Witch, and kind of off on his own. But make sure that he's in a column if you want him to receive the buff, and I would think using the Onmyouji, it's kind of important to focus more on keeping your columns full than it is to keep your rows full. And what I mean by that is we're kind of in a cross formation right now, but the Witch and the forward Shadow Blade are both missing out if I were to provide one of my buffs, which I didn't bring this time because I don't have them unlocked, but that is something you're going to be looking forward to doing on the Onmyouji. This is my first real time getting my hands on the Onmyouji, and it was fun. I used his expedition ability for the first time, I used Paper Turtle for the first time, which was exciting. Speaking of the Paper Turtle, earlier on in the video I said I don't know how it works, but I theorized that it would be sort of like a decoy, and it is. The Paper Turtle spawns wherever you want it to spawn, and it will just sit there and spam provoke for 4 turns, excuse me. The level 1 turtle lasts for 4 turns. I don't know if that increases as you level up the ability, and his provoke increases the chance you'll be attacked by 64%. So this could be a useful ability if you're fighting a lot of monsters that you kind of need to keep some level of control on, or if you're fighting an enemy and you know he's going to do some sort of charge up ability, because at the very least, that'll give him another body to thwack and maybe he won't one-shot your sister. My final thoughts on the Onmyouji is that I'm a big fan, honestly. I know that he was the last character for me to really play and get my hands on. I kind of feel bad about that, because traditionally my favorite role are the utility characters. Characters that can control enemies, buff allies, cleanse allies, make everything better. Think of bards and enchanters. And it makes me very happy to see this archetype represented in MISTOVER. So thank you all for watching. I hope that you enjoyed and that you learned something about the Onmyouji. If you did, make sure that you like the video, subscribe, and press that stupid bell so YouTube knows to notify you, because there'll be more MISTOVER content coming soon. Bye-bye!